Let's be joined by our two political strategists, Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker. Good to see you both this afternoon. We might come back to the energy policy, but I want to get your thoughts on the by-elections we've seen in New South Wales over the weekend in Cootamundra and Murray. The Nationals have hung on in both seats, but they were given a pretty big scare by the Shooters and Fishers party. Grahame, to you first on these big swings. We often see that in a by-election. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll see it in a general election. I did see the Nationals leader, John Barilaro, this morning here on Sky News talking to Laura Jays, laying the blame on the federal government and the problems it's having on energy and so on. But do the New South Wales Nats have to take some of the blame here as well?
I thought the Deputy Premier Barilaro was going all right for most of the day. And then he got on Sky and started saying, hey, it's the Fed's fault. I know the river and the Murrumbidgee irrigation area. It's my stamping ground. And I can assure the Deputy Premier that that part of the world knows the difference between a Barnaby and a Barilaro.
I mean, sure, they want the energy problem fixed too. I'm sure that's true.
Oh, there's a lot of things. And look, the name Liberal and the name National has smelt better around the country in the past. It's true that the coalitions generally are going through a difficult time, but you know, it's a bit naughty. Every half-decent politician knows that the Monday after an election, if you've had a big swing, and this is about 250% bigger than the average swing of by-elections around the country in the last 50 years, that you get out and you say, look,
we've heard the message.
It wasn't a great result. We've heard the message, and let me tell you two or three things we take out of it.
Yep.
Not, hey, mate, it's not our fault.
Not our fault, blame them. Bruce, that's exactly right, isn't it? Every time you cling on and there's a big swing against you, you've got to say you've heard the message of the electorate. You'll listen to what the voters are saying to you. And you've long argued, too, that voters do actually know the difference between state government and federal government.
Yeah, and I stand by that too. I saw in 2010 Kevin Rudd being blamed for the result in a state by-election in Penrith, which I just thought was nonsensical. And it was an old state Labor government in a fair bit of trouble. And of course, that was the result, and Penrith had nothing to do with the federal government. In this case, I think it's a similar story. I think the Nats got themselves into a lot of trouble in New South Wales when they supported the ban on greyhound racing. There was a big campaign waged by Labor and by the greyhound industry to turn that around. They campaigned hard in the seat of Dubbo and Orange and won that by-election, and won it, or the Shooters and Fishers did, and they won it quite handsomely. And I think we're still seeing something of that in politics at a state level in New South Wales. I was out at the races a few weeks ago, and a fella came up to me and said, I see you on Sky TV, what about the what's happening in New South Wales? And I said, where do you live? And he said, Cootamundra. I said, well, who are you going to vote for? And he said, well, I'm a Russidon Nat, but I can tell you, the Shooters and Fishers are going around saying that the National Party are just Liberals and Akubras. And I think that's part of the problem with the National Party in New South Wales. It's lost a lot of that sort of cow-cocky identification, and they seem to be more like Liberals. One Nation's
having such an impact, particularly in Queensland.
Indeed, and this is happening everywhere. We're seeing smaller parties nipping at the heels of the major parties, creating a lot of uncertainty. We're seeing it now with Xenophon in South Australia, we're seeing it with Hanson in Queensland, we've seen it with the Greens and Labor for a long time, and now we're seeing it with the Shooters and Fishers and the National Party. It just seems to become part and parcel of the way in which politics is almost dissembling these days. You're getting this fruit salad effect in politics where major parties are now being chopped up and smaller parties are inserting themselves into the meal, and that's coin a phrase there, Bruce. I like it, the fruit salad effect.
All right, now I won't get into who's the watermelon, who's the strawberry, and so on. But let's move on to the Newspoll result this morning, Grahame. We are keeping count because Malcolm Turnbull's the one who said it was 30 Newspoll defeats. That was one of the reasons Abbott had to go. 21 Newspoll defeats now for Malcolm Turnbull. Here's a reminder of some of the figures. The primary vote hasn't actually dropped any further, thankfully, for the coalition, but nor has it risen. And it's not great, is it, at 36%? And the two-party result there at 46 to 54.
Not great is probably a nice phrase. No, it's terrible. But all of these people talking about, hey, watch the polls around Christmas. No, it's not. A lot of the polls aren't done over Christmas. When you work it out, you get very close to the Ides of March. Now, forget Caesar. It just so happens that the Ides of March traditionally was when sort of debts were repaid by the Romans, and you killed a few sheep in honour of Jupiter, I think it was, the god of sky and thunder. But that is about the period when you hit 30, and clearly there will be huge media focus on that. But, even today, Tony Abbott did his radio interview. Tony Abbott's not the problem. Bill Shorten's the problem. And the sooner the coalition works that out, the better. Tony Abbott is not coming back. He's talking about himself. He was saying the only way he comes back is if he's drafted. Well, people haven't put pen to paper, let alone come up to the final draft of that. Everyone has got to take a very cold shower, do the policy thing well, and start next year, which may or may not be election year, in a different frame of mind and get stuck into Bill Shorten.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce,
haven't laid a glove on him.
Each time we get closer to the number 30, it looks inevitably increasingly like we will get to 30 Newspoll defeats. It'll be embarrassing for Turnbull, no question about that. But it, as Grahame says, it won't necessarily be fatal for him. It doesn't mean he suddenly loses his job.
No, but it does give people who are starting to get very nervous a good reason to say, well, that was the test that he laid down for Tony Abbott, and this is the test that we'll judge him by, because it's the backbenchers sitting there looking at their margins being whittled away who are going to make the final decision on his fate, not Tony Abbott, not anybody else. It's them. And I don't think he'll make it to the next election. I think, when he started out, he was fantastic. He was on plus.
Bruce, I'll pull you up there. You don't think Malcolm Turnbull will make it to the next election?
I don't think so. I think self-interest will kick in. When he was plus 40 when he deposed Abbott for the leadership, he was moving like a gazelle. Now he's limping along like a drongo, and Bill Shorten's starting to close in on him on the preferred Prime Minister ratings as well. So everywhere you look with this fellow, there's a problem. And I will talk about it in a few minutes, I guess, the issue about electricity, but I think he's creating a problem for himself there too.
Well, let's get into that, Bruce. I'll go to you first then on this. So, we'll see, this time tomorrow we'll have a good idea of where the government's going to go with its energy policy. It goes to Cabinet tonight, party room tomorrow morning. But the PM did make it clear again this afternoon. It's going to do three things: tackle affordability, reliability, and emissions reduction. That's a fairly decent starting point, isn't it, as to what a policy needs to do?
It's a great starting point, but where's it going to end? If he's able to do those things, then he's going to put himself in a much better position. But if, as I suspect is going to happen, power prices are going to creep up still. I mean, wholesale prices of electricity in this country have just gone through the roof. They've increased by 170% in Queensland, 160% in New South Wales, over 200% in Victoria and in Tasmania. These are huge leaps. If he can't bring them down, now that he's come up with his own program to do it, then people are going to look to him and say, well, you promised you were going to bring down the price of electricity, you're going to make it more affordable, more reliable, and none of these things are happening. Another reason to get rid of you. He's really creating a big challenge for himself here, and if he doesn't meet it, he's going to be in all sorts of trouble, because he'll be once again referred to his own words as a reason for removing him from the Prime Ministership.
Yeah, Grahame, it's a big test, this energy policy. What are you expecting in terms of a policy mechanism to come out of this tonight?
Well, the first one, I agree with Bruce. My electricity bills and whatnot went up 130% a month, went up. And look, I think the Prime Minister's on the right track. If you can do the affordability thing and the reliability thing, that means you are talking to mums and dads and families, and you're talking to business. That's the third one, which is sort of the emissions and whatnot. For those who give a damn, okay, well that's good. He's going to do something. I would sort of pause that for 3 or 4 years. We know we're going to hit the target in 2020.
It's pretty clear he's not.
I know, but we know we're going to hit the target in 2020. But But targets, sometimes. What happens when we hit this target? Do the Chinese give us a gold star? Do the Indians give us an elephant stamp? You know, we are going to hit it. Now, the important thing is what happens in Australia. And I think the Prime Minister is on the right track with trying to get the households right and the businesses right. But he's also got to say, hang on a minute. You know, Rudd was told about this, Gillard was told about this. I am fixing it because you know damn well we are going to have days in summer where we're going to have very, very awkward supply. And if we have a blackout, I think it's very important that Prime Minister is seen as a fixer and not the fellow who created the problem.
Indeed. And Bruce, to that point, I mean, you know, the emissions, I'm sure you would put greater stock on that than perhaps Grahame in terms of meeting the target that we've agreed to. But on the reliability part of this, it seems this is an area where Labor hasn't really got into the debate too much about how we stop the blackouts, how we make sure the power's there when needed. Do you think Labor needs to have, you know, a better policy line on that?
Yeah, I think they do, and it will be a mix of solutions, and I suspect the Prime Minister is going to try to come up with something along those lines himself, and he has been trying to do that. But reliability is a big problem for Labor, and the South Australian experience goes to that. This is where the rubber hits the road for state governments, because you know they see them as having some responsibility for actually making sure you can turn on the lights when you want to. The federal government, though, has got this overarching responsibility for ensuring that you know the prices are affordable, and I don't think they can escape that. And I think Grahame is right in a way. It'll come down to a question of prices. If the price of electricity just continues to go up or stays at the levels that it is at the moment, they are going to blame incumbents for that, and that's where it'll stop with him. If there's less reliability in the supply of electricity, then the incumbents who'll be blamed will be the Labor and Liberal state governments, who people would say have responsibility to make that happen. I think that's the way the electorate looks at these issues.
Well, but the good thing about it is tomorrow we get the answer. At the moment, we've all been talking about a void and nobody's known what to defend or what to attack.
Yeah, this time next week, when we catch up, we'll no doubt see how the dust has settled on it all. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to both of you this afternoon. Thank you.
David.
Investigators are trying to work out what caused an Air Asia flight to lose